Hello everyone, I'm here today with Zoe Eliza, a singer-songwriter from the north of England. She's a folk singer-songwriter, and she's now based in Glasgow. How's things?
Good, yeah. I'm very tired at the moment. I've just kind of been home I've been home over the weekend for a gig in my hometown of Bury, so that's been really fun. But I'm definitely running on less sleep than I kind of should be.
That's completely fair enough. And I know that in your bio you mentioned that you kind of flip between Manchester and Glasgow and perhaps
Yeah.
all around the UK. What's that like for you if you're kind of getting from A to B on your own?
I have to do a lot of singing in my car. I've got the car karaoke nailed down. I yeah. So I really really enjoy kind of traveling around. And kind of going to new places. And I always kind of center it around going to see people. So it's yeah, I try and fit in as much as I can when I kind of make a trip for a gig. And we've recently got a camper van as well, which will hopefully make it so much easier to travel for gigs. Um, and not having to kind of center things around accommodation and things as well. Um, so yeah, I always love going to play at new places and visit new places. So that's absolutely lovely.
I would imagine that you don't get a lot of kind of storage to take equipment, etc. down. So is it just you and a guitar, or what's your kind of typical itinerary?
Yeah. So most gigs, it's probably me and a guitar. And then if I kind of have more space, it's easier now. Now obviously I drive, um, but often I'll kind of take a banjo with me. You've got all of your, and then depending on kind of the setup for the gig, you've got speakers, amplification, microphones, that sort of thing. So yeah, so it can kind of range, kind of depending on the setup, to be honest.
Yes, it's all kind of provided for you, which is quite handy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've done a few road trips, and there's not a lot you can fit in a car, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
My main car is a Mini, and yeah, that is a whole new level. You can't fit a guitar. I think I've worked out that you can just fit a tenor banjo in the boot. But anything bigger than that, you can't fit.
That's actually, yeah, we done a road trip up to Stirling just over the weekend there, and trying to get two people's luggage, like big bags of luggage, was near impossible.
That's rough. That yeah,
It's quite a task. So you'd mentioned there you're up and down the UK, and I'm presuming that was the inspiration for the name of your album Northern Ground, released 2019. And it's comprised of five tracks that showcase this kind of ethereal yet what I thought was quite a haunting style. Um,
yeah.
what would you say was the inspiration for that album?
So for the album, I think um, so a lot of the inspiration was definitely kind of being back home. And it was kind of the feeling that invokes in me. So the title track, Northern Ground, um, that was very much a song about longing for home. That was written at a period that I was at university and I was kind of coming back home in kind of short bursts and I was massively missing home. And it was written kind of with the Pennines in mind, and with all of these kind of wonderful green places that I'd grown up around, and the warmth that I feel at home that I've not quite found elsewhere just yet. Um, and so in the album, there's quite a few kind of different songs. So there's definitely a focus on kind of home, and it another focus of the album is definitely kind of history and so it's important to mention probably that I started writing a lot of the songs for the album when I was 15. So a lot of the songs were written 15, 16, 17, um, bordering on 18. And they were very kind of, a lot of them are very historical focused. And there's a few kind of folklore focused songs. So you've got the Morrigan as well. But they were very based upon my interests at the time. Well, I went on to study history after writing a lot of these songs. So yeah, there's a whole kind there. I think the album is more of a kind of compilation of songs more than anything. Um, it wouldn't have come about if it wouldn't have come about and without a man named Brian Egerton. I was playing a gig in the Marble Arch in Manchester. I think I was 19 at the time, which was kind of how this album came about. And he is a friend of my mum's, and he kind of went to kind of listen to me and listen to the album and listen to my music, and he kind of brought this idea of the album into formation and put a lot of work and time and effort into bringing it into fruition. Um, so I think that's the reason that it was such a kind of compilation. It was because I'd had all of these songs that I'd written over the years, and it was putting all of my favorite songs that I'd written onto this one album. So it was an incredibly proud um, kind of. It was a piece of work that I was very proud of, and it was a piece of work of about all of these songs that I had written because I loved the subjects, and so history and home and kind of Celtic folklore with the Morrigan. Um, so yeah, massively mixed bag there, I think.
And yeah, I noticed that actually. I probably one of the first tracks I clocked the name of was the Morrigan. Definitely a huge fan of Celtic folklore myself. And you touched on something there, just that I've done a couple of interviews, and recently it's this very similar theme of someone that I spoke to earlier about your heritage and about home and the
Yeah,
things that kind of matter most to you. Would you say that's something that that features quite heavily in your songwriting and who you are as an artist?
massively. I think so. When I was growing up, I didn't quite understand the gorgeousness of home, to be honest. It was when I was kind of around 15, 16, 17, I started really looking into local history and looking into the Industrial Revolution, and really kind of connecting with my own heritage and connecting with the local history of the areas. And I started to really appreciate where I was from and appreciate my roots. And I think that is probably a lot of the reason that there's that I'm so proud to be Northern and proud to be from Derry. And
Yeah,
yeah,
no, of course, and I think that's something that is really important. I see it coming in a lot more now, is that we seem to be going back the way almost and getting
yeah.
back in touch with these roots. And you sort of touched on it there, but was there ever a moment, or what made you go, I want to be a singer-songwriter?
So there is it's kind of a it's not it wasn't kind of one moment, it was a collection of moments. So when I was probably about 7, I remember going to my first like proper gig, and it was at the Met in Bury, which is an absolutely incredible venue, and I've had the kind of pleasure to play there quite a few times since. And but we'd so my mum would bring home the program, and we'd look through it, and she'd be like, oh, I'd quite like to go see those. And I think the first gig that I went to was a band called Waking the Witch. They were absolutely brilliant. It's a collection. It was just, I think, it was like a girl band, and they were absolutely wonderful. And it was like comprised of a lot of finger picking, um, all of these gorgeous harmonies. And from there, we went on to go see so many different bands, and it was like girl night. And a lot of them were kind of folk bands, like trad folk bands, from Scotland, for example, which is it's probably one of the reasons that I moved up to Glasgow, was because of music. And I don't think that would have happened if I hadn't had that if I hadn't had that kind of early introduction to Scottish folk. Um, but the point that the point that I kind of wanted to be a singer-songwriter was probably about 11 or 12, and it was definitely I had been I'd been listening to all these trad folk music, and it had been kind of it had been best parts of my kind of childhood. Um, and I think about 10, I wrote my first song. It was absolutely terrible. My mum still brings it up now. But it kind of I built up this momentum, um, and it almost became like a bit of an addiction, just writing these songs and getting all these words out. And I'd sit for hours. I'd sit for hours with my guitar, like kind of as soon as I got home from school. And I probably did that up until I was about 18. So I think I definitely could have had like a really um, I could have been like a wild teenager, but yeah, I went home and played a lot of guitar.
And I don't think that's a bad way to, to spend there's
No,
plenty worse things you could be doing.
massively, yeah.
And I mean, you kind of touched on it there. My next question, I came across this theory that we are all just a tapestry of everyone we've ever met, all the experiences that we've ever had. I'm curious to see what are some of the things that would be at the forefront of your tapestry.
Ooh, I think definitely home.
Okay.
I think that would be a massive, massive part of it. Um, I think I really, really value kind of nature, and being around that, which I think probably comes out in my songs as well. Um, I was I was kind of brought up surrounded by nature. Where I lived, I grew up around a lot of farms and near the Pennines. But also I grew up with a mum that taught me all the names of the trees and the plants, and so I have a massive, massive appreciation for nature. So definitely nature. Um, I think um, music, probably without a doubt, that would probably be the largest part. I think even now, kind of having grown up a lot more, and I now have other things in my life, like I work a full-time adult job, and um, but it's still a integral part of my life to yes, it's a massively integral part of my life, and it's it's not phased out. It's still as integral as it was when I was about 12. um Probably more integral now. And yeah, another part of it is probably animals.
Mm.
um bit off topic, but I love animals. I had the pleasure of actually working the vets for 4 years. um
I'd love to work in a vet, you know. Yeah,
it
I
was
have
really
plenty of
fun.
animals myself. I have 9 cats, which is
Oh, I love that.
it's a fact I love to tell people, and they're like, "How many?" I'm
Love
like,
that.
yeah, 9.
I've got 2 cats and 2 dogs, and they're all just absolute joys to be around. I'm very, very, very lucky.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, no, I think they're definitely like the highlight of my day. I always remember coming in from college and perhaps it'd been a stressful day. Being able to just settle down with a cat it made the world a better place. Um,
I think scientifically the purr like calms you down as well.
I'd looked into this, yeah. I'd done my dissertation on sound healing, and there is weight behind
I
that.
love it.
There's
Yeah,
definitely weight behind
exactly. Yeah.
that. And you'd kind of, you appear to be gigging constantly all over the place. What would you say are some of the most memorable gigs that you've played, or do you have any kind of standout moments that go, yep, that I'm never gonna forget that?
So um there's quite a few standout gigs for different reasons. One actually was this weekend. I played a gig in the HMV back in Bury, and they have recently kind of moved stores, but it was, um I spent a lot of time in that HMV in Bury when I was younger, and it was always like a really cool, it was a really kind of cool place to be. I'd go look at all the albums, and I got my first album in there, and it was just, it felt like a bit of a full circle moment to be going home to play a gig there. And it felt like even more of a full circle moment when I heard, I walked back in kind of, to kind of start the set, and they were playing my album over the speakers, and that was an incredible moment. It was one that I was really proud of. Um, and then um, so I've mentioned the Met earlier. So the Met is probably the most iconic venue to me. It's it's a venue in Bury, and it's where I'd kind of first seen all of. I went to my first gig, and I continued going to all of these wonderful gigs that inspired me to become a musician. And I had the pleasure of supporting the Peterbog Fairies there, and they are one of my all-time favorite bands. And it was just, yeah, it was an absolutely incredible moment to support those. So it was supporting one of my favorite bands in one of my all-time favorite venues. And then the third one is probably when I was at, it was just last year now, and played a gig at Lady Lever Art Gallery in, um, I don't want to say Liverpool, it's near Liverpool. Um, I don't want to upset any Liverpudlians because it might not actually be
That might be wise.
Liverpool.
That might be wise.
Exactly, yeah. But it was, and I was playing this set. It was part of, I can't remember what festival it was now, but and I was looking out onto all of these gorgeous pre-Raphaelite paintings, and it was just so memorable to be singing. I was saying one of my songs that I was singing was "The Watchman's Son." It's I think it's the first song off the album, um, and it's a song about smugglers in Cornwall. And I was looking out, and where I was positioned, I could just see this painting of the sea, and it was the raging sea. And as I was looking out on this, I was thinking, this is the single coolest place I could ever play a gig.
So I suppose that kind of answers my next question. Perhaps from those three, what would be your most favorite venue?
Without a doubt, the Met. That for me is it's a place that just invokes so much feeling. Um, I've seen probably a lot of my favorite bands there. I have played some of my my favorite gigs there. Um, and even kind of when I walk past it, I just I get this kind of excitement, and it's probably the best part about coming home.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, if you ever get the chance to go, I would highly recommend it. It's such an incredible venue.
I will definitely keep that in mind. And you'd kind of mentioned it earlier about yourself being a working musician.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's been any changes kind of within the music scene, like within the industry, things like COVID, the rise in the cost of living, like not to get political, but just the landscape has changed so drastically.
Oh, massively. Yeah, massively. I think it's become a lot more difficult to kind of survive as a musician nowadays. I think it's become, Scotland's probably a lot easier, as there is kind of funding for musicians, um, compared to the landscape in England. Um, but I think there's a lot of venues closing, and there's a massive struggle for venues. So you've got the issue of venues having to put prices up with the rise of rise of the cost of living. Um, but also, I think there's I would probably say less people are probably going to gigs because they can't afford to as much. So there's definitely a massive kind of struggle there. Yeah, so I think the landscape has definitely changed from COVID, and from, well, and as a result of the cost of living as well. and I don't know if it'll necessarily go back. I think it's something that you've got to it's about evolving and adapting to that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it's
definitely.
definitely a lot harder as a musician. I think once everything kind of opened back up after lockdown, it was just I think the change was already visible and the damage was very, very visible, and there was a lot of fractures in the kind of structure of it.
Yeah, for sure. It was actually just on the news there about like a lot of the local venues in Glasgow threatening
Yeah,
to close. It's simply just not a viable option to stay open.
yeah,
Which is
exactly.
unfortunate, and it will directly impact loads of people. But I suppose kind of, on a more positive note, um, what's kind of next in the pipeline for you? Because I know that you've got lots of gigs coming up.
Yeah. So gigging,
Yeah.
that's a massive thing that's coming up. Um, I gig anywhere and everywhere, and it's the highlight of my week, for example. But I'm also working on an EP at the moment, and that's in the pipelines to come out. It's taken a lot longer than I was kind of hoping, but again, um, I think that's kind of the issue. Like life just kind of gets in the way, and with working, it just um, kind of throws a spanner in the works a little bit. I think. Um, but yeah, gigging and getting an EP out, and hopefully exploring more places and doing more gigs in more far and wide places in the UK, I think.
For sure, yeah. I mean, all that sounds exciting. And having listened to Northern Ground, which I can only recommend, I'm very excited to hear this EP.
Thank you very
If
much.
it's anywhere on the same par, it's going to be a great one.
Thank
Um,
you. That's so lovely.
but yeah, I mean that takes us to time now. But thank you so much for coming on. And I can't wait to see what's next for you.
Thank you massively for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Until next time, I'll see you then.
Thank you.